Okay, gang, this is it. This is the grand finale. We need to do CNS tumors and we'll be done with our pathology review. So, CNS tumors, very high yield and very tested. They really, really like to test these. Now, one of my friends said, John, if you just know location, 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 if you know the location, you can guess most of them right on the exam. So, let's always focus on location because if we know where it is, it should really help us. So let's start with some general rules. Do you remember the tentorium cerebelli? Tentorium cerebelli separates the cerebellum from the cerebral hemispheres. Well, for children, they're small. So for children, you look below the tentorium. So for children, 70%, 70%, 70. So we just turn on the writing utensils. 70% is going to be below the tentorium. Now, for adults, it's the opposite. Adults are tall. So 70% are going to be above the tentorium, super tentorium. Makes sense. So for kids, you look low. For adults, you look high. Again, 70% of the time. So for children, we look in the posterior fossa, so usually cerebellum and sometimes brainstem. Cerebellum and brainstem. Now, for children, the number one tumor is an astrocytoma. It's a grade 1 astrocytoma. It is called pilocytic astrocytoma. Very tested because it's the most common. It's the most common tumor. Now, good news is it's usually benign. Benign. Now, in the brain, benign is not such a great word because what does it mean to be benign? It means resectable. That's really what it means. So it's in the cerebellum. I can usually resect it. I can cure you. If it's in the brainstem, can't resect it. So even though they call it benign, it's going to kill you. It's going to kill you. So in the brain, benign and malignant is not a good term. What we should call in the brain is resectable, unresectable, because that really determines whether you're going to live or die. So these are mostly benign, meaning resectable. So that's good. Now, if it's unresectable, it will kill you. Ooh, anything that kills kids is bad. So remember, this is mostly a resectable tumor, which is good. Now, the second most common tumor in a child is a malignant tumor, which spreads rapidly and will be unresectable in many cases. It's called medulloblastoma. Remember, children get immature, small round blue cells. We call them blastomas. So small round blue cells. Now, the good news is if I catch it early and it's local, I can resect it. But once it spreads, the resectability goes down. So again, the most common tumor, good one, usually resectable. The second most common tumor, you got to catch it early. If you catch it late, it kills you. So this will be considered a malignant tumor. Now, for adults, it's the opposite. The most common tumor is the worst. It is a grade 4 astrocytoma. We call it glioblastoma or glioblastoma multiforme. This is the most common and the most tested. It's also the most lethal. Most common, most lethal. Terrible tumor, hard to resect it. That's terrible. So for adults, when they get brain tumors, they're usually horrible. Now, if you're lucky, you'll get the second most common, which is usually resectable, which means it's benign. So those are meningiomas. Those are great ones. I wish we could switch it. Okay, so glioblastoma is most common and it's most lethal. Meningioma is number 2. Now, for most primary brain tumors, they're more common in men than women. So that's a good rule. Men more than women for most brain tumors. Now, there are 2 exceptions. Do you remember the endocrine chapter? Everything in the endocrine chapter we dedicated to women. So pituitary adenomas, which we covered in endocrine chapter, those are more common in women. And then meningiomas, because they tend to have progesterone receptors. They have progesterone receptors, can be more common in women. Men can get it too, but more common in women. So those are the only exceptions. Most brain tumors are more in men. And then women will get meningiomas more likely and pituitary adenomas. Now, for adults, we have an issue. It could be a primary tumor, meaning it's coming from the brain, or it could be metastatic, because adults can get prostate cancer, lung cancer, it could spread to the brain. So what's the difference that I should look for to tell a primary tumor coming from the brain versus a metastatic tumor spreading to the brain? Well, metastatic are well circumscribed because they come from outside the brain. So once they get there, they're going to push everything out of the way. So they're going to be well circumscribed. They're usually going to be multiple, and they're usually at the gray-white junction. So here's the gray matter, here's the white matter. Usually see these ring-enhancing masses, multiple at the gray-white junction. So that's an important rule. When things come into the brain, they almost always get stuck at the gray-white matter junction. So that's where you see abscesses, bacterial abscesses when they go in the brain, and that's where you see metastatic tumors. Do you guys remember President Reagan? Not President Reagan, President before him, Carter. Do you remember President Carter? He was a Georgia peanut farmer, and then he became a president. So you're too young to know about this. But President Carter, yeah, well, he was a farmer. He's out in the sun. So he got melanoma. And like 2 years ago, it spread to his brain. He had metastatic melanoma to his brain. He had 3 lesions at the gray-white junction in his brain. Now, don't worry, he's getting the best treatment ever, so hopefully he will be cured. But when you see metastatic melanoma, that is never a good thing. That's a very poor prognosis in general. And it was in his brain. So metastatic tumors, remember gray-white junction. Now, for primary tumors, they're arising from the brain. So they're kind of poorly circumscribed because it's hard to tell where the tumor started and the brain ended. It's coming from the brain. So it's kind of hard to see the demarcations. It's usually a single mouse, but the most important thing is location. Like I said, if you know the location, you can usually guess them right. Okay, so we're going to focus on locations. Now let's start with the most common. The most common for both is astrocytomas, for both. So grade 1, which is a good one for children, that's polycytic, and grade 4, which is a bad one, glioblastoma for adults. Okay, now just a few more rules, and then we'll talk about those in specific details. Okay, first tumor we're going to talk about are glial tumors, not tumors of neurons, no, glial. Glial are the supportive cells of the brain. So what are the glial cells? Well, they're astrocytes, so they're going to have astrocytomas, oligodendrocytes, oligodendrogliomas, and ependymal cells. Now, concept. Does an astrocyte turn malignant and become an astrocytoma? No. We think this is an immature precursor cell, that becomes malignant. When it does, if it looks like astrocyte maturation, we call it an astrocytoma. If this precursor cell gets mutated and looks like oligodendrocytes, we'll call it an oligodendroglioma. If this tumor gets mutated and looks like ependymal cells, we call it ependymoma. So again, it's not a tumor of a mature cell. It's a tumor of a precursor cell, which will give evidence of differentiation. If it differentiates like an astrocyte, astrocytoma, and so forth. Make sense? Now, if they are resembling glial cells, they're going to have a stain that's positive. It's glial fibrillary acidic protein. This is a good marker for all of these glial cells and all of these glial tumors. Again, it will not usually light up in neuronal tumors. Neurons have their own markers. This is going to light up for only these tumors. Now, concept of malignancy kind of has to be revised, as we mentioned, for brain tumors, since they don't usually metastasize. So staging is kind of useless. You don't see metastatic brain tumors because they kill you. They don't need to spread. So staging is useless. Here, grade is important and location. Location because it determines resectability. If it's in an area that I can resect, I'll cure everyone. If it's an area I can't resect, it could be the most slow-growing tumor ever, but if it's in my medulla oblongata next to the respiratory centers, I can't resect that. So even though it's slow-growing and benign, it will kill you anyway. So location is critical for determining resectability and therefore prognosis. So grade is what it looks like under the microscope versus location. These are the two most important things for brain tumors. Now, for grading, we have the WHO, World Health Organization grading system. We very simply divide it between grade 1 through grade 4. The higher the grade, the worse the tumors. And by the way, concept, progression. Most tumors are going to progress over time. So it starts as a grade 1. Next year, it could be a grade 2. The year after that, it could be a grade 3. Tumors tend to progress over time. So we're always going to talk about in this chapter, what is it usually? What's it typically? Because over time, if you leave it there, it's going to get worse. If it recurs, it will recur as a worst form. So over time, they get worse. Now, how do they do the grading? Well, you won't have to do it, but here's how they grade. They're going to look for things that are bad. So atypia, that would be worse. That would be bad. Pleomorphism, different size and shapes, that's bad. Lots of mitosis, it's proliferating. Necrosis, that's always bad. That's a very aggressive tumor. And vascular proliferation, it's feeding itself. That's bad. So these are the things we're going to look for high grade. So if you see a lot of atypia, pleomorphism, necrosis, mitosis, That's high grade. If I don't see these things, we'll call it low grade. Again, you don't have to grade it, but that makes sense, right? These are the features they're going to use to grade the tumors. Now, let's start out with the most important, astrocytomas. We're going to start off with a WHO grade 1 astrocytoma, which is a really good one. It's called a pilocytic astrocytoma. And as I mentioned, it's usually benign behavior, so we consider this a good one. As long as it's in the cerebellum, we can resect it. If it's in the brainstem, you got trouble. But if it's in the cerebellum, which most of them are, we can resect them. Now, this is the most common brain tumor in children and young adults, so that's important. Children, young adults, think pilocytic. And it's usually located in the cerebellum, posterior fossa, cerebellum. It could also occur in the floor and walls of the third ventricle, too. But cerebellum is the most common site for this. Now, the description is the key. When we do the MRI or CT, we're going to see a cystic mass. So here's the cerebellum, and you're going to see a cystic mass. In the wall will be a mural nodule. So you're going to see a nodule there. Now tell me, does that look resectable to you? Does that look like you can just kind of like resect that right out of the cerebellum? Yeah, it's kind of well served. It's like a local tumor. So this has a good prognosis because I can usually resect it. Now I may cause some balance issues because I'm messing up your cerebellum, but at least you'll be alive. So these are usually resectable. I don't want any brain tumor. I want a brain tumor. I want a grade 1 that's resectable. Okay? So remember, cystic mass with mural nodule. Now in this picture, this is the cyst. It's filled with this gelatinous fluid. I wish they took this fluid out here, but this is the cystic space with this fluid. And then here is that nodule. Here's that mural nodule. So this is where the tumor cells are, and there's just a big cystic space next to it. Okay, so cystic space with a mural nodule, that's the class description. So I'm going to change the name. I'm going to call it pilocystic. I know it's pilocytic, but I'm going to call it pilocystic. So remember, it's a cystic mass in the cerebellum. Now, the GFAP is positive like most glial tumors. And why do they call it pilo? Because pilo means hair. It means hair. Pilo is hair. So these astrocytes are going to have bipolar processes with hair-like projections. So here's what the tumor cell looks like. Here's the nucleus. And then here's the projections. Look at these long processes, long bipolar processes. So doesn't it look like a long hair? It looks like a hair because it's really long. So bipolar processes makes it look like hair. Now, if you look closely, you're going to see these wavy pink inclusions. They kind of look like corkscrews because they go back and forth like that. They're wavy. We give them a fancy name. We call them Rosenthal fibers. So they're eosinophilic. They're made of protein like GFAP. They're acidophilic granular bodies that are kind of corkscrew. They go back and forth like a corkscrew. They're kind of wavy. Those are Rosenthal fibers. Sean, is that pathognomonic? Not exactly. But for the purposes of USMLE, I say Rosenthal fibers, you say pilocytic astrocytoma first. But they can be seen anytime there's gliosis. Anytime there's old chronic astrocyte proliferation, you're going to see this. Because it's just an accumulation of GFAP and other proteins. Yeah, but it's not specific. But I want you to remember for the exam that it is. I say Rosenthal fibers, you say pilocytic astrocytoma. Got it? Okay, so very important to remember that. Now, here are the features. Hair-like processes and Rosenthal fibers. So pilocystic, cystic mass with hair and Rosenthal fibers. So how about the song that you sing for kids? Do you remember for kids you sing, Twinkle, twinkle, pilocytic astrocytoma, how I wonder where you are. Down below the tentorium cerebella, like a hair and Rosenthal fiber. Twinkle, twinkle. All right, I'll stop singing. Actually, I'll send you a version of a professional singer singing it, and you'll really appreciate it. So yeah, it's a really good way to remember it though. Rosenthal fibers, hair, and the cerebellum cystic mass, very important clues. Now, these often have activating mutations in BRAF. Remember V600E mutations? Activating. So do you remember what drug we can use for this if it's unresectable? So unresectable cases, if it's in the brainstem, I can't get it out. Well, I can use vemurafenib. Vemurafenib. I love this name. V to E mutation in RAF. Vemurafenib. So really cool. So anytime there's BRAF, like melanoma, hairy cell leukemia, papillary thyroid tumors, Langerhans cell histocytosis, whenever we see BRAF mutations with V600E, you can use vemurafenib. It's kind of stuff that I would test if I was writing using the questions. Now, NF1 patients, remember neurofibromatosis type 1? They got neurofibromas, they got Lisch nodules, they got CAF-OA. Well, they often have optic gliomas. Optic gliomas. What is that optic glioma? It's a polycytic astrocytoma. So again, it's associated with NF1. That's cool. That's a nice association. All right, cool. Very high yield tumors. All right, by the way, in the video, I actually show the hair and the the Rosenthal fibers. So I'm going to show the video. Take a look at the video so you can actually see the Rosenthal fibers. And students get it right because I remember the song. I remember Twinkle, Twinkle, Rosenthal fibers. So they got it right. All right, now some other glial tumors will do more astrocytomas. We talked about grade 1, but there's grade 2, there's grade 3, and there's grade 4. Now the rest of these tend to be diffuse, infiltrating, and that's not good. I like the focal one that I can resect. Diffuse ones, the prognosis are much worse. So they're going to infiltrate the brain. Now, if they infiltrate most of the brain, we give it a fancy term. We call it gliomatosis cerebri. Your entire brain, or large areas of it, are extensively involved. Well, tell me, how do you resect that if it's the tumors percolating through your entire brain? That's not a very good prognosis. So some of these cases will be very widely spread and it'll be impossible to cure them. So even though it may be a grade 2, it can still kill you. Boo, boo. Now these account for most cases of adult gliomas. They're usually astrocytomas. And it's most common in adults in their 30s and 40s and 50s. Now, it usually occurs in the cerebral, hemisphere. So anywhere in the hemispheres, but usually in the white matter. Now, what do you present with? Well, seizures, headaches, focal neurologic deficits can occur depending on where the tumor is located. And that's pretty common for most tumors. Most brain tumors can present with seizures, headache, and focal neurologic deficits. So you want to get some imaging and you'll see an infiltrating lesion. Kind of hard to see where it starts and stops. Now, the types of diffuse astrocytomas. We got well-differentiated ones, which are considered grade 2. We've got anaplastic ones, which have funny-looking cells and increased mitotic activity. That's called grade 3. But the one you better know is the grade 4. Grade 4. This used to be called glioblastoma multiforme, GBM. Now they just call it glioblastoma. Because remember, when you're famous, you use one name. So Cher, just one name. Okay, so they call it glioblastoma now, even though they used to call it glioblastoma multiforme. It's got multiple different formations. But that's glioblastoma. They love it. Now, question, you can get it de novo. Just bad news. Or you can get it from progression. Remember we talked about these low-grade ones can progress? These low-grade ones can progress. Now, the low-grade ones tend to have mutations in isocitrate dehydrogenases. So the lower-grade ones, the better-acting ones, have IDH mutations. So when you see IDH mutations, that usually means a better prognosis. So if it comes from lower-grade ones, it will have this mutation. And that's usually a better prognosis. If it happens de novo, like most of them do, they won't have this mutation, and that's a very bad prognosis. So again, that could be secondary to progression, so I'll put secondary, or it could be primary. If you see the IDH mutation, that usually means it progressed, and that's usually a better acting one. Again, I don't want any of these tumors. So let's talk more about these. Now, for the lower grade ones, as I mentioned, 2 and 3, they have mutations in IDH, isocitrate dehydrogenase genes. IDH1, IDH2. IDH1 is the one we use for seeing if it's better or not. So IDH1 is an important stain to identify low-grade gliomas. What is IDH1? What is it? What are these mutations? What are they doing? Well, IDH gene mutations inhibit enzymes that regulate DNA methylation. Do you remember you have to methylate to turn genes on and off? Well, this is going to cause epigenetic dysregulation. You're not going to be able to turn off genes that you should turn off, and then you're going to get growth. You're going to get growth. So that's why this mutation is important for tumors and tumor progression. Okay, so remember this gene. And again, it's good for low grade. It's a good prognosis. It's a better, I should say good, it's a better prognosis when you have this. Now, unfortunately, low grade tumors get progression. They're going to progress to higher grade lesions over time by getting new mutations. So they'll get new mutations in tumor suppressor genes like P53 or RB. They can get mutations in RAS and PI3 kinase. This is what's going to cause progression, new mutations. Now, if you get primary glioblastoma, that's not one that has, that just starts out grade 4, starts out. Those are the ones that don't have these mutations. They have mutations in PTEN and amplification of epidermal growth factor. So again, what do I need to know here? Well, I need to know here this. Whenever I see this, I think it's a lower grade, or if it's grade 4, it's going to have a better prognosis. So this is a marker of good, better prognosis. Okay, that's important. Now, it makes sense. Malignant tumors have P3 mutations, right? Malignant tumors, as they progress, RB. It makes sense. Okay, and of course, primary ones have P10, so that's a little bit different. P10 and epidermal growth factor. P10 is a brake on the growth pathway, so if I lose that brake, I grow. And epidermal growth factor is a tyrosine kinase, so that causes growth. If I amplify it, I'll have more copies. So that's for primary ones. Now, histology changes. As things become high grade, we're going to see more and more pleomorphism, more and more mitosis. Ki67 will go up. Remember, that's a proliferation marker. So mitotic prism Ki67 rate goes up. Necrosis starts to occur, vascular proliferation, all the things that we talked about that were bad, that will indicate it's becoming high grade. Now, for well-differentiated lower grade ones, 2 and 3, the mean survival is usually over 5 years. Okay, so you got some years to go. It's still not good because it's still going to kill you in a lot of cases because I can't resect them always. But you got a decent survival. Now, glioblastoma is horrible. Mean survival with good therapy is 15 months. That's not even a year and a half. That's less than a year and a half. Boo. Glioblastoma is the baddie. Very poor prognosis. And that's the one that you need to know. So here are all the details. Remember glioblastoma multiforme, glioblastoma for short. On MRI or CT, these are going to be ring-enhancing mass lesions. And here's what it often looks like. So here's the brain when I do a CT. Remember, these things are not the eyes. These are called the lateral ventricles. Those aren't the eyes. What happens is this tumor starts here in the white matter of the centrum semivalli. And then what it loves to do, since it's very malignant, it crosses the midline to the other side, kind of like a warped butterfly. They call it a butterfly glioma when it does this. Not everyone's going to do this, but they often cross the midline, and we call them butterfly gliomas. So I get a lot of emails saying, John, I saw a butterfly on my USMLE. So we can be pretty sure that they're going to ask about butterfly gliomas. Now on gross, they're in the white matter and they're very ill demarcated. So if you look at this picture, do you see the butterfly? Do you see this necrotic area here? If I outline it, look at the way it goes across. See that? Looks like 2 wings of a warped butterfly. That's your butterfly glioma. So something that looks like this is going to be on your exam. On CT or MRI, if you add contrast, it'll be ring enhancing mass lesion. Now, why are these so bad? Well, my buddy's a brain surgeon. I'm like, dude, you're a brain surgeon. How come you can't cure these? How come you can't cure it? He goes, bro, because you're only seeing the dead tumor. You're not seeing the living tumor. You think it's just there. No, let me show you where it really is. Let me erase what you drew there. Let me erase this thing. I'll get rid of this and show you where it really is. Okay, let me erase that. Here's where the tumor really is, because you're just seeing the necrosis. You're not seeing the tumor. Okay, all this is tumor, this is tumor, this is all tumor, all this is tumor, all that's tumor, this is tumor, that's tumor, this is tumor, this down here is tumor, this is tumor, that's tumor, oh, this up there is tumor. And then I said, okay, I can understand why you can't cure them. Because it's almost impossible to get them out. It's hard to see where the tumor stops and the normal brain is. It's really hard to get them out completely. He goes, John, if I can get them all out, if you found one early, I got it all out, I can cure you. But 9 times out of 10, I can't get them out. So I play a game. I try to scoop out as much tumor as I can without scooping out things you still need. I can never quite get them all. I can't get them all. So therefore, I'm going to do surgery. I'm going to get as much out as I can. And then I'm going to relieve some radioactive beads in for any areas that I don't think I got all of. Now I'm going to close you up, and right away you're going to feel better. Your seizures stop, your focal neurologic deficits go away, your headache is gone, your papilledema is gone, your vomiting is gone. Everything is gone. All that pressure has been relieved. But 6 months to a year later, you're going to get repeat seizures and focal neurologic deficits again because it's going to come back. So in 6 months to a year, it's going to come back. And when it comes back, I couldn't resect you the first time. I definitely can't resect you when it recurs. So basically, we send you off to die. We'll give you a little palliation with radiation, and we send you to die. That's the problem with these tumors. When they recur, they kill you. And if you remember way back, well, you're too young, but you remember the original ER TV show with George Clooney? Well, do you remember Dr. Green? He was tall and balding. He was Goose in Top Gun, Dr. Green. Well, that's what happened to him. He started getting focal neurologic symptoms. They did a CT. They said a ring-enhancing butterfly lesion crossing the brain. He said, oh, my God, it's glioblastoma. They went in. They did surgery. They couldn't get it all. Now, he felt better. He did a bunch of episodes, and then it came back. And do you remember Dr. Green's final day in the ER? When it came back, he knew he was going to die. So he hit the doors. They open. He walks out. Ka-dunk, ka-dunk, ka-dunk. He walked out to the sunshine to go die. Isn't that terrible? Terrible tumor. And there was a woman on the internet who had this. And once it's unresectable, you're going to die. We'll palliate you, but you're going to die. So she said, I don't want to suffer. I want to die when I'm still relatively feeling well. So I'm going to kill myself on this day. Now I'm going to choose. I have power over my tumor. I'm going to choose when I die. And then there was a big controversy on the internet. Should the government allow her? Should she not be allowed to? So she said, forget that. I'm moving to a state that is physician-assisted suicide, and I'm going to kill him. I'm going to end my life when I'm still happy. I'm going to end it as a celebration. We have a big party. Everyone will be there, and then I'll end my life. And that's what she did. That's what she did. Isn't that sad? Sad, but that's the only power she had. She didn't want to be sick. She didn't want to wither away. Interesting, huh? So very interesting diseases. This is also, by the way, the tumor that killed. Do you remember, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit? Yeah, Johnny Cochran. Do you remember the Kennedys? Ted Kennedy, the senator from Massachusetts? Do you remember the catcher for the Mets, Gary Carter? Oh, you're too young, but there's a catcher called Gary Carter. He got this and died of it too. So this killed a lot of important, famous people. It's the most common adult brain tumor, and it's the most lethal. You must know it. Now, under the microscope, there's a hallmark finding. Yeah, I'm going to see ugly-looking nuclei. They're funny-looking. They're different sizes and shapes. I mean, look at the size of this purple dot. This purple dot right there is bigger than everybody else. So you got funny sizes and shapes. You're going to have lots of mitosis. It's very active. Ki-67 will be elevated. And then you'll see areas in necrosis where the tumor cells are dying. So these areas in here where the tumor cells are dying. These areas, pink areas in here where the tumor cells are dying. Tumor cells dying. But then it's so evil. Here's the area of necrosis. All the tumor cells want to see it. So all these purple nuclei start lining up. They start lining up next to the area, like a picket fence. Well, when things line up, we call it palisading. Yeah, but it's got a lot of layers. So they call it pseudo-palisading because lots of layers. So we call this, see the tumor cells right here? See all these purple dots next to the area of necrosis? So this is necrosis with hemorrhage and necrosis. These are the tumor cells lining up next to it. They're lining up. This is called pseudopalisading of the tumor cells around areas of necrosis. That is a hallmark finding. So again, a brain tumor with necrosis and tumor cells palisading around it. Do you see it? So here's the necrosis in the middle. And then as you look along, see the purple tumor cells lining up. They're all lining up like a ribbon of tumor cells next to the necrosis. On the other side too. On the other side, they're all lined up. So that's the hallmark feature. It's like a car accident. If the police are there taking out the dead body, you're not supposed to stop. These tumor cells are so evil, they slow down. They start taking pictures take selfies with the dead bodies. Yeah, crazy, huh? So this is bad. And again, all the things we talked about, vascular proliferation, mitotic activity, necrosis, these are all bad features. So remember glioblastoma. So let's stop for a second. Cystic mass in the cerebellum of child, cystic pilocytic astrocytoma. Butterfly-shaped lesion crossing the midline. Crossing the midline from white matter to that's a glioblastoma. Location, crossing the midline. White matter tumor crossing the midline, ring enhancing, that's glioblastoma. So the key is it's crossing across what structure? What structure is this? Corpus cavernosum? You're thinking with the wrong brain. Yes, that is our secondary brain. We actually use it as a primary brain most of the time. But in this brain, it's the callosum, corpus callosum. And that's really a very important finding. So a white matter tumor crossing the corpus callosum, you want to think about glioblastoma. All right, now the next one is much better. Oligo, oligo. Again, this is a tumor exhibiting differentiation of it looks like oligodendrocytes. That's what it looks like. So oligo. Now, most of these are going to start out as grade 2. If you don't resect them, they become grade 3, and they can transform into glio. So very important that you dissect these because tumors progress over time. But most of them are going to present as grade 2. And this accounts for 5 to 50% of these glial tumors. So astrocytomas were the most common, but these are the second most common glial tumor. Now, who gets it? Adults, 30 to 50, kind of just like astrocytomas, and they present usually with seizures. So I want you to remember, adult with seizures. Well, if adult has seizures, I'm going to do a CT or MRI, and on CT, I will see a calcified mass in the frontal lobe white matter. That's usually where it is. So let's repeat. When I get my CT, I'm going to see a frontal lobe calcified mass. That's the key. So adult comes in with seizures, you see a frontal lobe calcified mass, very characteristic. And notice under the microscope, not much mitosis. So that's a much lower grade tumor. These are much better. I like oligo. Oligo, we have a chance at cure here. So in general, it's a much better prognosis. Average survival is 5 to 10 years. And again, there will be cures here. There will be cures. Now, if you leave it there, it progresses from low to higher grade. So it can eventually become anaplastic, grade 3. And that's going to be much worse when it progresses. Now, since this is a better tumor, it's kind of like an astrocytoma. What was good, better prognosis? Well, IDH. So isocitrate dehydrogenase gene mutations is a better prognosis. So that's good. Keep this in your mind. Whenever I see these mutations, that is better. It's better for astrocytes. It's better for oligodendrocytes as well. Now, another thing that's important for prognosis is if there's a co-deletion of 1p and 19q. So these deletions occur together. If they have them, that's good because they tend to respond really well to chemo and radiation. So I'm going to try to resect you. If I can't resect you, the chemo and radiation will work. Yes, better survival. Now, if it doesn't have these co-deletions, without it, they're resistant to chemo and radiation. So their only chance of cure will be resection. So very important for prognosis to know about this gene and these chromosomal deletions. Very important for prognosis. Okay. Now, frontal lobe. Can I resect things in your frontal lobe? Yeah, you can usually resect them. They're in the frontal lobe. In fact, if you wanted, you could do a frontal lobotomy. You'll lose all your personality. But nowadays, you might not notice. Not many people have personality nowadays. Now, making a joke, but usually tumors in the frontal lobe, we can do pretty good resections on. We can. So if we can resect this one, we can cure it. If we can't resect it, we got to hope it's got this mutation and has these deletions because that would be better response to chemo and better prognosis. But most of these, I would say the majority, we can usually get them out and cure you. That's good. So oligo's good. Now, under the microscope, when you remove it, it's got a characteristic feature. The nuclei are surrounded by a halo. So here is the cell. Here is the nucleus. Around the nucleus is a clear space. So here's the pink cytoplasm. And you get this clear halo, this vacuolation around the nucleus. So now it looks like a fried egg. So you got the yolk and the white. It looks like a fried egg. So do you see these fried egg appearances? See the fried egg? See the vacuole around the nucleus? They look like fried eggs. Lego my ego, oligo. It looks like fried eggs. Cool. Question, how do you write this again? Oh, yeah, oligo, look. Oligo, look. Oligo my ego, oligo. The name tells you it's going to look like a fried egg. And not only does it look like a fried egg, but the blood vessels crisscross. Now, you can't really see it here, but I think you can imagine this vessel and this vessel are going to cross each other eventually. So what you get is capillaries that are very delicate and cross-linking. They're all cross-linking. They're going across each other. So that is what's called a chicken wire vascular pattern. Chicken wire vascular pattern. So it's like you're on the farm. You want to fry some eggs. So you go past the chicken coop, which has chicken wire, and you get some eggs and you fry them. So it's like you're on the farm. I love it. So lego my ego, oligo, lego my ego, oligo. So don't miss this picture. Easy to test. And again, prognosis is much better than astrocytomas. Better chance of cure. All right, now this one I don't like. Ependymoma. Ependymoma. This is a tumor that exhibits ependymal differentiation. Now, what do ependymal cells normally line? Ventricles. So this is going to rise in next to the ventricles. That's what's going to be next to where the ependymal cells are supposed to be, next to the ventricles. Now, for children, we look below the tentorium. So for children, we look in the fourth ventricle. That's where we're going to see them. So in the fourth ventricle, you'll see this large papillary tumor. It's usually papillary. It doesn't have to be. It's usually papillary. Large papillary tumor in the ventricle. So look at the locations. Location, cystic mass in the cerebellum, pilocytic acertoma. White matter tumor crossing the midline, glioblastoma. Frontal lobe and calcified with eggs, oligodendroglioma. These are clues. Now, for adults, they usually get it in the spinal cord when they have neurofibromatosis type 2. So that's what I would ask about these tumors. Associated with NF2 and the fact that they occur in adults in the spinal cord with NF2. That's what I would ask. But most cases on the exam are going to be children in the fourth ventricle, okay, below the tentorium. Now, as I mentioned, they can be solid, but they're usually papillary masses, and they'll extend up from the floor of the ventricle into the ventricle space. So tell me, if they're in the ventricle, when they get big enough, what are they going to cause you to present with? Well, they're going to block the CSF eventually. When they block it, you're going to come in with obstructive, non-communicating hydrocephalids. That's how these usually present, because they're usually in the posterior fossa in the ventricle, and they're going to present with hydrocephalus. So headache, pressure goes up, headache, papilledema, nausea, vomiting, papilledema. And if the kid is young, the bones haven't fused yet, the skull will enlarge. They'll become like aliens, like those big alien heads. Yeah, so that's how this is going to present. It's going to present with increased intracranial pressure in most cases. And then you'll do a CT or MRI, and you'll see a tumor in the ventricle. And again, location. If it's in the ventricle, I'm thinking of ependymomas. There's other tumors that could be there too, but always think of ependymomas when it's in the ventricle. Now, we're going to try to resect it completely. We're going to try. So when you resect it, what are you going to say? Well, ependymal cells like to line up. So the ependymal cells are going to line up. They're going to say, come on, everybody, let's line up. Come on, let's all line up. Let's line up around an empty space. We'll make our own ventricle. We'll make our own ventricle. This is called an ependymal rosette. Do you see the way they're lining up and there's a white space in the middle? See, there's a white space right in the middle? That is a true rosette. That's a ependymal rosette. See the way they're lining up here? I wish I can't really see the space in this one, but I can see in this one. See that white space in the middle? That's a true rosette. So look for those true rosettes. I think you see one really nice here. This is a beautiful one. You see that one? That's a beautiful rosette. See the empty space right smack in the middle? It's making its own ventricle. Cool. Now, what if it sees a blood vessel? Here's a blood vessel. What do tumor cells do? They all line up around it. See the way all these tumor cells are lined up around it? And then they put their pink cytoplasm. See these little pink projections here? They're like making like a neuropill. They're making a neuropill around this vessel. This is called, since there's something in the middle, it's a pseudorosette. There's something in the middle. We call this a perivascular pseudorosette. So that's kind of cool. We have ependymal true rosettes and perivascular pseudorosettes. Of course, it'll be GFAP positive, and most of these will start out as grade 2. And again, there's lots of variants, but I think it's waste your time to learn all the variants. I'd rather just learn what ependymoma is and remember there's variants. Some of them are worse, some of them are better, but there's variants. Just learn what an ependymoma is. I think you'll be in good shape with that. You can always look up variants. All right, feel good? So again, if it's in my ventricle and it's got rosettes, ependymoma. It's in the ventricle with rosettes. In the ventricle with rosettes. Now tell me, what if it was in the retina with rosettes? Flexner, Winter-Steiner? Retina? Then you call it a retinoblastoma. So again, location, location, location. Retinoblastomas have rosettes, but they're in the retina. Neuroblastoma has rosettes, but that's in the adrenal medulla. This is in the ventricle. Now, why do I not like this tumor? Because when you resect it, see these little papillae, these fingers? Little pieces can break off and float away. They'll seed the CSF. So the key here is adequacy of resection. If I can get it all out, I can cure you. The problem is when I resect it, pieces can break off, and then it's going to recur everywhere. It's going to recur everywhere. So remember, CSF dissemination, when it comes back, it's going to be unresectable, and they're going to die. They're going to die. Anything that kills children, I hate. I hate this tumor. I don't hate anything, but I hate these tumors. Okay, I'm not a hater, but this I hate. All right, so this is not a good tumor, and it usually occurs in the fourth ventricle, which is the one that usually seeds, or in the fourth ventricle. Not good. All right, that's ependymomas. Now, let's go to medulloblastoma. So blastoma, this is immature. By the way, we're done with glial tumors. Now we're talking about embryonal, immature tumors. So medulloblastoma, there's going to be another one called an ATRT. So there's going to be these tumors that are now very immature. And this is one of them. They call these embryonal derivative tumors. So medulloblastoma. Remember blastoma is small round blue cells? Like retinoblastoma had small round blue cells? These are small round blue cells. They're highly malignant, undifferentiated. They're just immature. And they're, by definition, grade 4. These are bad tumors. And this is the most common of the malignant tumors in children. For adults, the most malignant one was glioblastoma. For children, the most malignant one is medulloblastoma. Okay, so this is the most common malignant tumor. Now, it can have some differentiation. It can have neuronal differentiation, and it can have glial differentiation. So it can have some neuronal markers and some GFAP. So it can have some differentiation, but it's mostly undifferentiated. Now, it's usually in children and accounts for 20% of brain tumors in children. So most common was pilocytic astrocytoma, which is resectable. Medulloblastoma is less likely to be resectable. So this is the most common malignant tumor. Now, it exclusively, by definition, occurs in the cerebellum. By definition. So you can only call it medulloblastoma if it's in the cerebellum. For the kids, it's in the midline. For adults, it's usually lateral, but it's usually in children. So remember, midline cerebellum, that's where the tumor is located. Now, under the microscope, it has small sheets of funny-looking, small, round blue cells with lots of mitosis because it's very malignant. And these small cells say, you know what? We're really neuroectodermal. This is really a primitive tumor of neuroectodermal origin. So this falls under the category of primitive neuroectodermal tumors. So it's primitive and it's from neuroectoderm. Okay, but we're going to call it a medulloblastoma. We don't call it a PNET. We call it a medulloblastoma when it's in the cerebellum. But it falls under that category. So it wants to be neuroectodermal. So the tumor cells, these small round cells, they're going to start to do some differentiation. They're going to start to line up around a space, and then they're going to put their pink processes to make a neuropil. They want to make the background of the brain. So they make a neuropil. Just like the ependymomas did. They made a neuropil around the blood vessel. Here they're going to make a neuropil in the middle. So this is called now a pseudorosette because there's pink neuropil in the middle. We get a fancy name. We call it Homer-Wright pseudorosettes. This is just focal area of neuronal differentiation. It's telling you it's neuroectodermal. It wants to be nerves. It wants to be neurons. Again, high mitosis and high Ki67. Big time proliferation. Very malignant tumor. Now, genetics. This is important because it determines prognosis. Malignant tumors can be resectable or unresectable depending on how fast they grow and spread. So if there's WNT signaling pathway mutations causing it to grow, that's a good prognosis. So WNT is the winner here. WNT positive mutations are good. Now, kind of intermediate is Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is a growth pathway. So if that's mutated, it can cause growth, and that's kind of intermediate. It's not really good. It's not really bad. It's kind of intermediate. Now, the bad ones are either amplification of c-Myc, that's more aggressive, or isochromosome 17q. That's a very bad one. So again, these are poor prognosis. So in the brain, what's very important is grade, location, because that tells me it's resectable, and then genetics. Always look for these genes. So IDH, good prognosis. IDH mutations, good prognosis. For these, WNT is a good prognosis. So look for WNT. Sonic the Hedgehog is intermediate. c-Myc and isochromosome are bad. These are the bad ones. Now, as long as it's in the cerebellum, I got a chance of curing you. Here it is. I got a chance of cure because in the cerebellum, I can kind of resect that. You'll get some walking and balance issues, but I'm going to try to resect it. Problem is, it can break off and float down the CSF, down to the spinal cord. We call these drop metastases because it just drops down. It floats away in the CSF and drops down the arachnoid space, subarachnoid space, and basically grows in other areas. So if it's in the cerebellum, I have a chance of cure. Once it spreads down the spinal cord, the prognosis goes way down. Now, again, we try to save you because these tumors are radiosensitive. So we're going to radiate them, and then we'll try to resect what's left. We'll try, okay? So for a malignant tumor, this is pretty good. 75% are alive in 5 years. That's pretty good for a highly malignant tumor. I wish it was 90%, but 75% is pretty darn good for highly malignant tumors. So the rule is got to catch it early, hope it's one that has a good prognosis and hasn't spread much. Once they spread, they're much harder to cure. Okay, good. Now let's look at some pictures here. For children, we look below the tentorium. So we look in the brainstem and we look in the cerebellum. Now in this cerebellum, this is all this midline mass. Look at the size of this thing. So it's a tumor, it's got hemorrhage, it's got necrosis. This is malignant. Now this is a tumor that grew and pushed on the brainstem. So what happened here in the brainstem? Durée hemorrhages. Because of the pressure, it pushed in the brainstem and it bled. And that's what killed this kid. So this is a long time ago when they didn't have a surgeon. It grew out really big and it killed the kid from brainstem hemorrhage. Very, very sad case. Now, another thing it could do is break off and float down the spinal cord. And again, that's bad prognosis. Now, here's what the tumor looks like under the microscope. This is a famous picture. Notice small, round, blue cells. Some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are multinucleated, but they're small, round, blue cells in general. They look like lymphocytes. And that's sometimes how they describe it. They'll say there's a mass in the brain resembling lymphocytes, but lymphocytes don't play this game. They don't play ring around the rosette, ring around the rosette. They don't line up around spaces and put their pink cytoplasms in there. Remember the cytoplasmic process make it look pink? So it looks like neuropil. This looks like the brain. It's trying to be like a neuron. Cool. So this is evidence of neural differentiation. So look for these Homerite pseudorosettes. Homerite pseudorosettes. So this is very classic. All right, so don't miss this appearance. So brain tumor in the midline cerebellum with Homerite pseudorosettes and small round blue cells, medulloblastoma. Now tell me, what if the same tumor is anywhere else in the brain? Anywhere else in the brain? We call it a primitive neuroectodermal tumor. It looks very similar to this, except it has Ewing's translocation. So let's repeat. If this tumor is anywhere else in the brain except for the cerebellum, in the cerebellum it's always medulloblastoma, but anywhere else in the brain you call it a PNET. Now, the reason you don't call medulloblastomas is because it's got the Ewing's translocation. Do you remember 11 men on your team, 22 on the field? Yeah, EWS, Ewing's flying through the air. It also has CD99 positivity. He thought he was the best. He wasn't quite. He thought he was the greatest, like Gretzky. So that's why they don't call them all medulloblastomas. Because I was like, just call them all. Everything in the brain, medulloblastoma. No, only in the cerebellum is a medulloblastoma. Everywhere else in the brain, you call it primitive neuroectodermal tumor because it's got the same appearance. Same appearance. It looks just like medulloblastoma, but it's got this mutation, and it's got CD99. So we call it really, it's an extramedullary Ewing's, a Ewing's outside. So Ewing's was shooting for the net, peanuts. Now, what if I show you the same exact picture, but I say it's in the retina? Small round blue cells in the retina with rosettes? Rosettes in my retina? That's retinoblastoma. Same picture. What if I say, no, this is an adrenal medulla tumor in a baby? Oh, well, then this is going to be a neuroblastoma. Neuroblastoma, small round blue cells, home-rights rosettes. If I said, no, this is occurring in the bone, it's a bone tumor. Then it's a Ewing's. This is what Ewing's looks like. It looks the same. So that's why this picture is 5 stars. I can use it for Ewing's. I can use it for neuroblastoma. I can use it for retinoblastoma. I can use it for primitive neuroectodermal tumors in the brain. And I can use it for medulloblastoma. Wow. One picture, lots of points. All right. Now let's switch gears and talk about the second most common brain tumor in adults. That's primary. And it's a meningioma. And these are really good because they're usually resectable. As long as I can resect them, I can cure them. Now, what's sexy about them? They're usually benign, and they're arising from the meningothelial cells of the arachnoid. So they're always attached to the dura. That's the key. Look for the attachment to the dura. So these tumors are going to push on the brain, but they're attached to the dura. Okay? Now, typically, they start out as grade 1. Again, will they progress over time? Sure. Are there variants that are higher grade? Sure. There's variants. There's lots of variants. I just want to know the basic one. You can tell me there's different flavors, different colors for my Ferrari, but first learn the Ferrari, then you can learn the little flavors later on. But let's learn this. So most of them start as grade 1. They're usually resectable. They're good under the microscope, and they're usually resectable. They're on the external surfaces of the brain, so it's pretty easy to get on. Just take off the skull bone, pick up the dura. It's attached to the dura. Just bring it right out. They can also occur in the ventricles as well, which makes them harder to resect. Now, risk factors. There's 2 risk factors you better know. Number 1, radiation. Radiation. Number 2, neurofibromatosis type 2. Do you remember NF2, chromosome 22, 2 tumors in your brain? Bilateral schwannomas and meningiomas. Okay, so they often have multiple. In this syndrome, they have like multiple meningiomas. Multiple. All right, now let's go back to radiation. Does everybody remember who used to be married? He used to be married to Lance Armstrong, the one who cheated in the Tour de France. Sheryl Crow, the singer. Well, all I want to do is have a meningioma until the smoma bodies come over Santa Monica Boulevard. Yeah, she got one of these. And she had meningiomas. It was right here. So it was pushing on her temporal lobe, and she was forgetting, because the hippocampus is in the temporal lobe, right? She was forgetting the words to her own songs. She was forgetting. So she went in, they did a CT, and they saw a dural-based mass attached to the dura, pushing on her temporal lobe. And they said, oh, you got this tumor. What did she blame it on? She blamed it on the cell phones. She said, when I was on tour with my big hit song, I was on tour, I do all these radio interviews for hours with the cell phone. And back then, the cell phones are like a big box. You put them next to your ear, and my tumor's right here. So she thinks that it's the cell phone radiation, which, by the way, do cell phone radiation cause cancer? Yes, they do. They cover it up. But if you Google it, you'll see. They don't, because nobody wants to know it. I want my cell phone. But cell phones hold to your head for long periods of time do increase the risk of brain tumors. So keep your cell phone, but use the earplugs, use the extension earbud, or use the handheld, like put the voice so you can hear it. What is it called? The speaker. Use the speaker. But yeah, holding the cell phone to your ear for a long period of time is associated with a higher risk of brain tumor. Whoa. Again, they're not going to advertise it. Apple doesn't want you to know this, but you should know this. Radiation is an increased risk. And just radiating the brain, too. If I radiate for some other reason, you can get a meningioma in that area. The old days, they used to radiate the skull for, what was it for? Now I'm going to blank out. Well, there's a disease they used to radiate. It was on your skull, on your skin here. They'd radiate your skull, and they wound up getting a lot of meningiomas because of it. So that's how they discovered radiation and meningioma. All right, now notice it's more common in females. Ladies, If it's more common in females, there must be a reason. What could be the reason? Ladies, why would females? What's the ladies? Very good. Hormones. See, I didn't say that. You said that. A gentleman, you can never blame it on hormones. Only they can. Very important that you learn that lesson. So you said hormones. Yeah, these tumors usually have progesterone receptor positivity. Sometimes estrogen receptor too. Sometimes estrogen receptor, but progesterone receptors is the big one. So what happens if she has this and she's pregnant? It's going to grow rapidly. It grows rapidly during pregnancy. Okay? Because these tumors, that's something I'd ask. I'd ask about progesterone receptors. That's why it's more common in women than men. More common in women. And it's usually reproductive age women. When you have a high exposure to progesterone, it's not usually young girls, it's usually adult. Usually it's at the end of the reproductive life when you've had a long exposure. So Sheryl Crow got it, I think, in her late 40s, closer to the end of the reproductive life. And of course, friend of Michael Jackson, Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor, well, in addition to getting married and divorced, she also got a meningioma. It's okay, they removed it, she was fine. But she got a meningioma, and she was, I think it's like 59, so end of the reproductive life. That's usually when you're going to see it. Okay, you've had a long exposure to progestins, and you can get this slow-growing tumor, so it could present later. All right, now, it's slow-growing. It's well demarcated because just pushing the brain doesn't usually invade it. Now, it can go into the bone, the skull bones. But that's okay, because when I resect it, I can resect the skull bone with it and put a plate. It's all good. Now, it often has lots of psammoma bodies because the tumor cells are whirling. So when they calcify like a cinnamon roll. So that's one of the favorite features here. So I would ask about progesterone receptors, but they'll give you psammoma bodies too. Necrosis and hemorrhage are absent because it's a grade 1. You don't see a lot of mitosis. It is positive for epithelial membrane antigen. Now, that's different. That's not a glial marker, right? This is not glial, and that's not a neuronal marker, so that's kind of different. So epithelial membrane antigen, EMA positive. And on EM, you see lots and lots of connections, lots of desmosomes. That's also a hallmark EM finding as well. Now, these tumors usually have loss of material on chromosome 22q, which is where NF2 is. So that's what I would remember. Meningiomas usually have NF2 knockout. Oh, so what if you were born with an NF2 knockout because you had neurofibromatosis 2? Then you're going to get multiple meningiomas. You get a lot of them. So meningioma, NF2. That's the reason why it's associated, because NF2 knockout. So again, what would I ask if I was writing questions? Well, I'd ask that it's attached to the dura. That's important. It came from the meningothelial cells. I'd ask about progesterone receptors and maybe estrogen receptors. I'd ask about psammoma bodies. I'd ask about neurofibromatosis 2 association, because even the sporadic ones have this gene knocked out. Remember, usually 2 hits. 2 hits are required. And then if you're a gunner, you would remember EMA and lots of desmosomes if you're a gunner. Now, here she is. Oops. There it is. Here she is, Sheryl Crow. She was age 50 and she got diagnosed. I thought she was in her 40s, but yeah, she's 50, diagnosed in November with a meningioma. And notice she also had a history of breast cancer, and bold tumors are associated with hormones, estrogen, and also for this one, progesterone as well. So all I want to do is have estrogen, but I have a feeling the tumors have just begun. All I want to do is have a meningioma. Yeah, so she must have high estrogen. I guess to counter Lance Armstrong's testosterone, she had to have high estrogen to kind of combat that. So that's just cool. 2 tumors that are estrogen or hormonal dependent, breast tumors, also endometrial tumors, and meningiomas. These are hormone-dependent tumors. Oh, there she is. Friend of Michael Jackson, Elizabeth Taylor. She got it when she was 60. So women in their later reproductive lives, that's when you tend to have it. All right. Uh-oh. Am I frozen? I think my computer just froze up. Hold on. I hope I didn't lose you. Okay, there. That's better. It froze up for a second. Hopefully I didn't lose you. Okay, now this is what it looks on a CT or MRI. You're going to see this mass that's well circumscribed, solid mass, and it's pushing and pushing and pushing. By the way, if it invades the brain, you just give it a higher grade, and that means it may recur. But that's okay. You'll resect that too. So even when it invades the brain, it's okay. But it usually just pushes on it, gives you focal neurologic symptoms, gives you headaches and nausea and vomiting. increase in cardiac pressure. It can give you seizures. It gives you all the things that tumors